Welcome to this talk about the Odyssey Part 2, entitled Finding Your Place in the Cosmos. I will try to provide you with a different outlook from last week, based on the second part of the epic. We'll have to remind ourselves about Homer, the context, the poetry, and the quest, but we'll focus mainly on the resolution of the quest, on the levels of the cosmos, the personal level of Odysseus, the family level, and the society level with the politics on Ithaca. So you heard that Homer was a blind poet and performer from Smyrna. But maybe it was from Chios as well, because a blind singer existed there. He must have lived around the 8th or 9th century BC, but these times are very obscure to historians because very little records remain about them. Actually, Homer's work was so great that he quickly became a mythical figure. In the generations that followed, there were many tales about his birth, many of which associate his name with the river Meles. Either his mother was united to it, which is something that could happen in myths, or she gave birth to him close to the river after uniting with the god Apollo, or some local mortal, and after that she ran away. To cite only one of these tales, Aristotle, for example, in his Lost Dialogues on Poets in the 4th century BC, makes an account of Homer's birth. He says his mother was a woman from Ios that goes to shamefully give birth from the god Apollo next to the river. And then she is captured by pirates and sold as a slave to the king of Smyrna. The latter then falls in love with her and marries her, and Homer grows up in this kingdom. Historical sources record that as an adult, Homer did go through some voyages himself. And during these voyages, he lost his sight gradually. And thus he became blind, but kept on singing, and eventually wrote the story of Odysseus. Rivers and poetry are intimately linked in our imagination. Words sang can indeed be associated to live waters. Homer's Iliad and Odyssey emanate, or seem to anyway, from a godly stream, for Homer has the ability to enchant us. His endless tales are like a flux, a melody, and a declaration from heaven. Now let's look at the context a little bit. You heard that it was the beginning of literacy in the Greek world. The Greeks borrowed the 25 letters of the alphabet of the Phoenicians, made of consonants only, and adapted it, adding vowels, thus creating a very efficient system. It was also a period of renewal. The population was increasing, just as well as economic exchanges, and so was the cultivation of land. The small kingdoms of Greece were more frequently united. And it was the age of separation of the divine and secular power that was on its way, that will see its glory in the golden age of Athens a few centuries later. One date could help you situate these times. In 1776 BC, the first Olympic Games were held, for example. The singularity of Homer's work arises from this context. The Greek society was complexifying, moving from an archaic model to a more evolved and rationally organized type of society, which makes it in itself a revolution. In the Odyssey, Homer is weaving a design and renewing epic poetry with the quick twists and surprises in his plots. You've seen how flashbacks and projections come into the tale. Changing of points of view allow gods to speak, and then a hero, a woman, or a slave. The epic includes legendary characters from older traditional myths and legends, like the Cyclops, the Sirens, or the characters Odysseus meets in the land of the dead, along with new ones that nobody had ever heard of before. It features traveling bards, like Phemios in Ithaca in books 1 and 12, and Demodocus in Scheria in book 8. Explaining what bards did at the times and what they do is sometimes enchant their audience, like Homer does. Moving on to the quest, the Iliad and the Odyssey, both works from Homer, are a problematization of the evolution of the Greek society, carefully weaved in a song about the present. The joys and pains, troubles and hopes of a community are seen through these difficult times, and the characters of this story go through a long progression and a transformation. It is a story about finding your place, finding your purpose, and enjoying your life. When Odysseus enters the war in Troy in the Iliad, he faces a crisis, which is at the same time cosmic, political, familial, and personal. In the Iliad, the men of Greek times, the great warriors, go to the Trojan War. All the surrounding kings are summoned by the great Menelaus to bring back the beautiful Helen from Troy. The gods are angry. The society is jeopardized. The families are torn apart. And for each man, war and peace, anger and friendship, insult and honor are in question. On the other hand, when we turn to the Odyssey, Odysseus is transformed through his voyages from a bold young warrior to a sort of divinely elected hero. The Odyssey concentrates on both men and women from Greek times and the intricate relationships between them. Governed by the prudent Athena, Odysseus is able to pass through the many obstacles that the god Poseidon puts on his way. Despite all odds, he finds his way back home to his loved ones. The gods are reconciled. The humans and their societies are reconfigured, and the families are reunited. In part 2 of the Odyssey, the crisis is resolved on all levels. The cosmos, which was in total chaos, returns to balance, and Odysseus understands the meaning of his existence with his loved ones in Ithaca. For more clarity in this part, going to the resolution of the quest, I'll go back to key passages from part 1 and then show you how they are resolved in part 2. Let us first observe what is happening at the level of the cosmos. The story that you're reading begins in the cosmos. In part 1, book 1, the narrator first calls the muse and then offers a macroscopic view, a view from heaven on the lives of human and human adventures. Zeus, the god of gods maintaining justice and order in the cosmos, and his daughter Athena are having a conversation about our hero in Mount Olympus, where the gods of the Greek live. He must be really important since the gods are interested in his adventure. This cosmos includes a myriad of gods, but also all the elements of nature and humans themselves. The gods discuss the return of the Greek hero from Troy. Not all the warriors who fought in Troy succeeded in their nostos, their homeward journey. Agamemnon, commander of the expedition, returns home only to find his wife Clytemnestra with her lover Aegisthus, ready to murder him. Will Odysseus be luckier? Zeus moralizes about the origins of the troubles of man when he speaks about the behavior of Aegisthus. The recklessness of man is the cause of all their worries, but Odysseus seems different. His sufferings seem unfair. The spectator must then watch the unfolding of this problem with his own eyes. Will Odysseus receive justice from the cosmos and the gods? In the Greek world, recklessness is punished. Hubris leads to nemesis. Because the universe is just, ordered, beautiful, but also logical. And the righteous one are rewarded. Righteousness is here to be understood in the moral sense. The men whose actions are virtuous live in harmony with the Greek model of the universe. Athena and Zeus decide to help Odysseus return home. And when we turn to part 2, book 13, the gods are once again in council. And this time, the great earth shaker Poseidon asks Zeus about Odysseus. He is finally willing to forgive him, but he wonders of the consequences. Will he still be feared by mortals? And Zeus needs to reassure him, and here's his proposal. Zeus, who gathers the cloud, made answer, "Good brother, here is the way it seems to my mind best to do. When all the people are watching her, that is the Phaeacian ship, from the city as she comes in, then turn her into a rock that looks like a fast ship." Remember, we have just watched the Phaeacian ship bring Odysseus back to the shore of Ithaca. Odysseus is asleep, and the Phaeacians abandon him with heaps of gifts around him. Now Poseidon must manifest himself to accomplish an old prophecy in Scheria. As their ship makes its way back home, he covers the sea with mist, and then piles a big rock over their island and hides their city forever. The land of the Phaeacians, the only people who ever heard the story of Odysseus and his voyages so far, therefore disappears, leaving no trace. All past experiences are forgotten for Odysseus and his men, and a new page is turned in the universe of the Greeks. The cosmos is now ready for change, and its organization is inextricably attached to Odysseus' fate in Ithaca. If we continue reading book 13, we wonder also about the relationship between Athena and Odysseus. Is Odysseus a free man? Did Athena choose him for his qualities? What was his quest? How will it be resolved? While we consider the quest on a personal level, comparing once more parts 1 and 2 to see how Odysseus' character evolves, we see that the resolution of Odysseus' personal quest goes from a search for fame and recognition to a search for meaning and eventually answers in the end. When Odysseus first appeared in book 5, remember, he was tormented and lamenting over his fate. Argiphantes, the god's messenger, sent by Zeus, freed Odysseus. He talked to the queenly nymph Calypso and ordered her to help Odysseus. Why did Odysseus have to leave the paradisical island of the goddess Calypso? The island was beautiful, full of rare fruits and flowers and water. The queen was promising him eternal life and youth in exchange for his love. But he was sad, weeping on the shore, teary-eyed. Calypso had held him for so long also. He had been there 7 years already. Why does she let him go now? Maybe because Odysseus in this passage is finally able to choose an earthly happiness over all the godly gifts of Calypso, over immortality, over beauty and youth. He is ready to face his fears and return to Penelope, home. And so the gods, on their side, team up and work on his homecoming. Odysseus has been chosen because of 3 qualities that distinguish him from other men. First of all, the most obvious quality is his strength. He is a bold warrior who fought in Troy. His second attribute, nevertheless, is his intelligence, his resourcefulness. He is the man of many ways, referred to as never weary of tricks, or forever using to his advantage the mind that was in him. Athena knows all that. These qualities make him different from all the heroes that existed before him. And Odysseus' final characteristic is his will for home, which makes him able to endure all the hardships on his way. His efforts to reach his loved ones are bolstered by important moral qualities. He is patient, he has restraint, he is faithful, and he knows about hospitality. He shares most of these qualities with Penelope, his wife, and Telemachus, his son. And the men and women of these times regard these qualities as important. How will he find a way back home? Once Odysseus is set free from Calypso's islands, he arrives in the kingdom of King Alcinous the Phaeacian. And in this magical word of peace, as the bard sings, he proceeds to tell the story of his wanderings. The story of the voyages or wanderings of Odysseus properly start in Book 9 and end in Book 12. And during these voyages, Odysseus' transformation had begun. He had faced temptations of strength like the Cyclops. You've probably read this episode in class. These trials require strength and courage, but there's a poetical wisdom to them already. Why was Odysseus punished for blinding the son of Poseidon, Polyphemus? He did it only to save himself and rescue, at least momentarily, his companions from the uncivilized animalistic society of the Cyclops. He did it with his minds and tricks, yet he failed to show humility and screamed his name to the Cyclops, which will earn him the wrath of Poseidon. But is he really guilty? Zeus himself will intervene for him, reminding us that there is a form of justice, and this must prevail in the universe of the Greek. His punishment seemed unfair, and Odysseus did not give up. He persevered in his quest despite antagonistic forces, and with renewed determination. He also faced temptations of desire, like the sirens, for example. Here are Cyclops or sirens. The sirens' chant could make any man forget who he is and where he's going. And Odysseus passes by them, tied to a mast. And we wonder, is this a perfect song already? Is this a song godly to hear and authentic? But the sirens sing amongst the decomposed leftovers of the sailors who previously listened to them. They are related to death, unlike the poetry of the bards. They are far from Homer's poetry, and Homer cannot be associated to that. Neither can Odysseus. This is not the end of his quest. The personal quest of Odysseus takes in consideration all the lessons from his voyages. The magical island of Calypso, for instance, was too inhuman. The uncivilized word of the Cyclops could not satisfy Odysseus' mind, for it was disordered. The chant of the sirens was too morbid. And the other words all had defects along the way. Syria, the land of the Phaeacians, had a certain charm, I admit, but it will disappear under a rock as Odysseus leaves, so perhaps it was not meant to be. Odysseus, guided by his mind, the Greek word is metis, meaning cautious wisdom and cunning tricks, his skills and his virtues, and his will for home, faced all these temptations and was able to choose to return to Ithaca, the world that best suits him, thus manifesting his free will. And he always chose home and patiently awaited to return. When he finally gets back, he encounters another set of challenges. And he still has to make himself known to his loved ones and reclaim his throne from the suitors. Only then and there will he be happy. Only then and there will he stop longing and looking back at his heroic past. He will start turning to the present. These choices and his decision to live here and now bring us to the resolution of his personal quest. In part 2, the confrontation with Athena shows us that Odysseus is finally ready. When Athena appears to him taking many shapes, in order not to betray himself in front of her, Odysseus lies. But Athena replies to him, "It would be a sharp one and a stealthy one who would ever get past you in any contriving, even if it were a god against you. And yet you never recognized Pallas Athena. Always you are the same, and such is the mind within you, and so I cannot abandon you when you are unhappy, because you are fluent and reason closely, and keep your head always. Anyone else, come home from wandering, would have run happily off to see his children and his wife within his halls." Odysseus was perhaps punished for his recklessness by the wrath of Poseidon, but he has managed to deserve his homecoming. He has distinguished himself from all other men. Remember, all the men on his ship died before he reached Ithaca. On other embarkments, Menelaus was also delayed. Agamemnon returned only to be murdered. And Achilles died in combat in Troy. All the great warriors, the heroes of Troy, right, are named here. In part 2, which could be entitled Odysseus in Ithaca, Odysseus is favored amongst all men, and he's finally back home. Part 2 takes up almost half of the Odyssey, 12 books in all. It abandons the sorcerers, the monsters, and the giants of the wanderings, and involves mainly the characters from the castle. Odysseus, Penelope, Telemachus, but also the swineherd Eumaeus, the nanny Euryclea, as well as other servants, as well as also Odysseus' father, Laertes, and finally the 108 suitors, as numbered in Book 16, line 247-253. They are led by Antinous. They are Odysseus' rivals, and they have come from the neighboring islands to court Penelope. And in the end, we even see the fathers of the suitors, led by Euphetes, who will be coming to avenge them. That's in Book 24. But the population of Ithaca will join up and fight against them before Odysseus can be king again. The cosmos was ready for renewal. Odysseus himself has changed and been favored. A great design is being weaved before our eyes. And we will see next the resolution of the quest on the levels of family and society. Every twist in this plot has been meticulously orchestrated. The revelations can now unfold in Ithaca, so that Odysseus can reclaim his identity amongst his family and his throne in Ithaca. Once Odysseus is back in Ithaca, he is not a nobody anymore, as he once claimed to the Cyclops. He has earned the honors at war and deserved the recognition of his peers. He has been where no one has been. His son Telemachus, on the other hand, is still young, and he has never seen his father before. He belongs to a new generation. Like all the other young suitors in the palace, Telemachus has not been in Troy. He has grown up listening to the stories sung by the bards everywhere, as you have seen in Book 1, about the glorious warriors who fought for honor and vengeance in Troy. But he has not had a chance to prove himself. He is the first one to learn about Odysseus' real identity, and it involves a transformation by Athena from a beggar to a handsome man. Telemachus is very impressed, and Odysseus has to scold him a little bit and remind him who he is. Telemachus, he says, it does not become you to wonder too much at your own father when he is here, nor doubt him. No other Odysseus than I will ever come back to you. But here I am, and I am as you see me, and after hardships and suffering, much I have come in the 20th year back to my own country. What kind of lesson is Odysseus trying to transmit to his son? If we go back to previous episodes, during the Great Wanderings, for instance, Odysseus' recognition was mostly due to his physical courage and intelligence. For example, in the land of the dead, Odysseus saw the ghost of his mother, Anticlea, knowing that she had passed away, and she had come to him. He was also recognized by the ghosts of King Agamemnon and the warrior Achilles, his companions in Troy, both regretting the double-edged sword of glory and honor that led them to die at war, while Odysseus is still alive and on his way home. Odysseus realized then that honors humans give cannot replace happiness. Now that Odysseus is back in Ithaca, plenty of time has passed, and with Telemachus we wonder if he's still the same man. He is definitely looking for something more meaningful than anger, war, and revenge. He has longed for so many days to find a way home to his loved ones. He wishes to live a simple life in his island away from trouble. And perhaps that is what he can transmit to Telemachus. His quest has gone from a quest for fame to a quest for meaning. And certainly the epic of Homer speaks of a glorious past. Yet Homer changes the history of Agamemnon, Achilles, and Odyssey to show us a lesson more valuable than heroism at war. Telemachus is won on Odysseus' side immediately, and Odysseus exits the house of Emmaus, the swineherd, to head for the palace. At the door, he sees his old dog Argos, wagging its tail in front of him. But the dog is too feeble to get out. Odysseus proceeds to enter the great hall, where all the suitors are wasting their days away, and he must now find Penelope amongst this violence and chaos. His kingdom is drained. Penelope is facing another problem. As she explains in Book 18, when Odysseus left, he made her promise that if one day Telemachus is at the age of becoming a man, and he has not returned, she must choose another man and remarry. That's in line 269-70. In love, truth and disguise play a very important role. And the most important scene is perhaps when Penelope faces her husband after so many years. Seeing him for the first time disguised as a beggar, she says to him, "I waste away at the inward heart, longing for Odysseus. These men try to hasten the marriage. I weave my own wiles." And we wonder, did she recognize him? And what are all these young suitors still doing in her house? Has Penelope really waited for him? The shroud that Penelope weaves for the burial of Laertes could be a symbol of concealment, especially since she is unweaving the points that she's doing by day every night. But weaving is also a symbol of creation and bringing to birth. And it points out to us what the suitors admire Penelope for, what they want in her. It is perhaps her likeness to Odysseus. They are both weaving a design, inviting us to a magical universe. They play with the truth to entice us, like Homer does, disguising his wisdom into poetical verse to seduce his readers. And Odysseus, disguised as a stranger, is also able and is still weaving. As Penelope does, he proceeds to tell his own tale, fully invented. He lies to Penelope, but he holds her spellbound. And as she listened, her tears ran and her body was melted as the snow melts along the high places of the mountains when the west wind has piled it there, but the south wind melts it. As the river run full flood. Odysseus and Penelope are heroes, and their actions have no match in the Greek word. But are they knowingly testing each other? There's a lot of emotion here. They must both remain in disguise a little longer in order perhaps to save themselves, even though they are very close to unveiling the whole truth. As the emotions get more and more intense in this book 19, Penelope tells him about a dream she had of an eagle that soared high in the sky. With his crooked beak, the eagle attacked her enemies, broke their necks, and killed them all. But it then spoke with a human voice and said, "I am your husband." The old man, the beggar in front of us, interprets this dream as an omen. He reassures her that Odysseus will return. And she says that she and Telemachus would be glad if he did. But she's afraid it might be a deception. Penelope cries in front of Odysseus the beggar, and Odysseus holds his tears. Yet the queen sends the stranger to get a bathing with the nanny. And the next recognition happens there. The nanny recognizes his scar as she cleanses his feet, but he forces her to keep silent. And then comes the bow contest between the suitors. The winner will marry Penelope, but Odysseus is amongst the suitors, disguised as a beggar. And just before the climax of the scene, when he had to shoot with a bow, Odysseus puts a mouse and a shepherd, Philoetos, on his side. He kills Antinous and tells the other who he is. "You dogs," he says. They never thought that he would come back from the land of Troy. Odysseus and his men have trapped the suitors, and now they drop one after the others. Ironically, Odysseus spares the bard Phemius, who sang to charm the suitors, and the herald of the palace. But he then proceeds to cleanse the palace from all the traitors. Penelope is still refusing to recognize Odysseus, even as he won the bow contest that she organized, knowing that only him could string the bow. Has she given up? It's only at the last moment in book 23 that Penelope seeks the strength and wisdom to test him again, and asks him a final trick question relating to their wedding bed. She asks the maid and nanny Euryclea to move their wedding bed to another room and set it for Odysseus alone. And Odysseus is now certain that this bed cannot be moved because one of its legs is a live olive tree. He made it himself. And nobody enters the room. He gets angry and asks what happened to his bed. And so he spoke, and her knees and heart within her went slack, and she recognized the clear proofs that Odysseus had given. But then she burst into tears and ran straight to him, throwing her arms around the neck of Odysseus, and kissed his head. With these embraces, we know that Odysseus has finally reached his home, the place where he can be in the here and now, with no remorse, no regrets, nor hope for anything better in the future than his island. He is a much wiser man. He has seen through the universe's trips and traps. He has felt and tested the faithfulness of his loved one and recognized his place is with them, and vice versa. Finally, in the end of book 23, Odysseus and Penelope go to bed, this same bed that served as a test. And Homer says, "Now dawn of the rosy fingers would have dawned on their weeping, had not gray-eyed goddess Athena planned it otherwise. She held the long night back at the outer edge. She detained dawn of the golden throne by the ocean, and would not let her harness her fast-footed horses, who bring the daylight to people, Lampus and Phaeton, the dawn's horses who carry her. Through their love, Odysseus and Penelope live a moment of eternity here on earth. The night is prolonged, dawn is postponed. And this is almost the end of the story. Yet, there are still some loose ends. Like, what will happen once the people realize Odysseus and Telemachus have slaughtered the suitors after the bow contest? Odysseus, therefore, asks Telemachus to clear the blood and prepare a ceremony, knowing that the fathers of the suitors will certainly try to get back at Odysseus and his men. There comes the final revenge, where one man from Odysseus' clan kills Euphrates, one of the suitors' fathers. But the goddess Athena forces a reconciliation, and Zeus himself intervenes to stop the combat. There will be no more bloodshed, and the people must learn to live together once more. The difficulties that Odysseus faces to get back on his throne and bring back unity on his island are a sign that the times of Homer were complex time. Kingship was a problem already, and tyrants were beginning to appear everywhere in Greece before democracy was born. Yet the voice of order had spoken since the beginning through Zeus and Athena's council. Its authority was delivered in one block, and its power will prevail. The cosmos must return to balance and beauty. And so does the society of man and the family of Odysseus and Penelope. The suitors had offended the gods by trying to seduce Penelope and by abusing her hospitality. They have all died. Hospitality is the law of Zeus, and it contributes in establishing alliances between men. Yet once again, where does truth lie? The suitors' desires were never accomplished, and their plans to kill Telemachus, their host, have failed. The intelligence of this episode is important to understand this tale and the message behind mythology and epical tales. The suitors could be here compared to the Cyclops and their unhospitable behavior. The contrast between them and Emmaus, the swineherd, for example, is clear and striking. Emmaus is the first one to greet Odysseus on his land on Book 14. He opens his humble house to him. He built it himself in the perimeters of the castle, and as he begins to hear the stranger's story, he roasts, I quote, his finest pig for him, sprinkling them with barley, and pouring red wine, I quote, sweet as honey to him all through the night. And this is what his master would have done, he claims, if he were still alive. Penelope respects this tradition as well as Emmaus, and insists on feeding and entertaining the 108 suitors in her home as much as the old beggar. But how do the suitors treat Odysseus disguised as a beggar? They mock him and insult him in his own home, and so disgrace Telemachus and Penelope. Order which must be restored on the island of Ithaca is complex and must always conciliate the contradictory forces of the universe. When all the suitors are finally dead, Homer tells us about the people of Ithaca, and now they would have killed them all and given none of them homecoming had not Athena, daughter of Zeus of the Aegis, cried out in a great voice and held back all the company. Danger will remain in this universe. Homer told us the story of Odysseus, a hero coming back from war with his companions. Homer was not interested in the gods particularly, but rather in the unfolding of historical events, showing as he went along the love and intelligence of men and women of his times, and how it managed to get them out of despair. He has shown us the complexity of this world. Odysseus has been all along longing for this simple life on his rugged island. His place is there, close to his loved one. For comparison, consider the ending of the Epic of Gilgamesh. On one hand, Gilgamesh, having slain many giants and monsters and been to the end of the world, got back to Uruk because it was a convenient solution. Going back to the city he had left at the outset of the epic, and where he was king, is presented as the best of two choices given to him, either going back to fetch the plant of immortality or returning to Uruk empty-handed. And he was able to make a choice, eventually. On the other hand, Odysseus had witnessed a violent crisis, threatening the human order and the divine order. Since the war exploded in Troy, he has faced these problems with his will for home as a guide and with his mind, even if the actions that he had to undertake could only be settled from the present. He was able to weave his wiles and reach his palace and reclaim it before all. And when he finally returned to Penelope, there was harmony again in his family, in his island, and in the universe. Finally, the name of Odysseus will forever be tied to the sea. The Epic of Gilgamesh ends on magnificent funerary rites performed for the godlike hero Gilgamesh, whereas the prophecy that Tiresias had uttered in the land of the dead about the last days of our hero is not accomplished in the Odyssey. Death will come to you from the sea, says Tiresias in Book 9, in some altogether unwarlike way, and it will end you in the ebbing of time of a sleek old age. Your people about you will be prosperous. All this is true that I tell you. The ending of the Odyssey is a happy one. Penelope and the people of Ithaca are reunited. But Homer is not interested in peace and happiness. We can imagine this end, this life, by ourselves. The stories we learn from are those of all the people Odysseus met and all the cultures he saw. And they have a universal meaning for us today as we dream of wandering in faraway places before returning home. To conclude, there are final elements in Odysseus' quest, final lessons that we can remind ourselves of. First of all, Odysseus found his place in the cosmos, the ordered, just, and beautiful universe of the Greeks. Second of all, he has learned to live in the present moment and refused the immortality of the gods. Third, he let go of his attachments to glory and wealth, knowing that his heroic actions at war will be nothing in the face of death. And finally, in his island, he even got a glimpse of the eternal here on earth through his love for Penelope. Thank you very much.